Welcome back. Thanks for being with us on the Pulse tonight. With the Tshwane Metro, one of the main centres where a coalition government may be an option, you could almost say will be an option, if none of the parties get an outright win. The council being in turmoil, several mayors hit by several scandals, taken over by the Gauteng provincial government. That was overturned by the court's elections. Expert Wayne Sussman joins me again to unpack the issues in this council. Wayne, good evening. Thanks very much indeed for coming back in. So in Tshwane, the history is quite similar to Joburg. ANC dominance and then that momentous year of 2016.
Correct. So what we see, but there's a slight caveat, slight difference. So yes, the first thing in any election, if you want to take power from the powerful incumbent, is you have to get them under 50%. And that's what happens in 2016. The difference between the city of Johannesburg and Tshwane is here, the Democratic Alliance actually beats the ANC. They get 44% of the vote in 2016 and the ANC gets 42%. And the other major difference between the city of Johannesburg and Tshwane are that the Red Berets are the clear kingmakers in this municipality. There is no path to power without the economic freedom fighters. And the Democratic Alliance does a deal with the EFF in 2016.
So, I mean, that's likely to happen again now, right? So in Joburg, there were other parties that you could do a deal with to get enough to win the mayoralty. In Tshwane, that wasn't an option. History could easily repeat itself. In fact, very likely to.
If one looks at the three Gauteng metros, the city of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, you can point very strongly to the idea that again, this time round, the economic freedom fighters are likely to be the kingmakers. I think it's unlikely at this point, with about 11 days to go before the elections, that the ANC or the DA get close to 50%.
So, I mean, it takes us back to the same question you have in Joburg. What if no one wants to do a deal with anyone else?
Well, that is more apparent and more at risk here, because one of the parties will have to do a deal with the economic freedom fighters. And will the EFF want to do a deal with the other parties? That is going to be absolutely critical. Again, I do not think the economic freedom fighters, the EFF, can do what they did in 2016 and say, we'll support governments from the outside. We do not want to sit in those governments. I think the EFF will have no choice after this election, where they can, to take their role in the mayoral committee and try effect change.
Okay, then there's the strongholds of the different parties in Tshwane, and this is quite interesting. There's a really interesting geography to Tshwane in this.
Correct. So what key to understand with the ANC not being the biggest party in Tshwane in 2016 was they were not happy with many of the branches not happy with Toko Didiza being their mayoral candidate. But also, you look at a place like Winterveld, a traditional ANC stronghold. That is going to be key in this particular election. That is where the ANC vote still held, but turnout was down. That's in the north of the city towards the Limpopo border. When one looks at the Democratic Alliance, their strongholds are in the east of the city, places like Garsfontein and Linwood. We recently had a by-election in Fairy Glen where the Freedom Front really ate into one of the DA strongholds. And let's not forget, we've been speaking about the EFF. In places like Attridgeville and parts of Soshanguve, the EFF did remarkably well. You see the ANC vote share. These are traditional ANC strongholds fall to 55 to 60% in these traditional townships. That is one of the reasons why the ANC came second. And what is going to be key here also this time around is, can the DA, we've just been about Soshanguve. What's not known is, and in some of those townships, the DA is getting over 30% of the vote. So can the DA hold back the Freedom Front on the one side in places like Fairy Glen and parts of Pretoria West? And can they continue to do well in areas like Soshanguve, or the EFF and ANC continue to grow in those areas?
I mean, it's very difficult to know, but you would think the DA are unlikely to get 30% in Soshanguve after everything that's happened in that political party, and yet there's, very little publicly available polling on this.
Correct. It is unlikely for the DA to do as well as they did in parts of Soshanguve, as they did in 2016, but we spoke about it yesterday, differential turnout. Are we going to see turnouts in traditional DA strongholds through the roof, where again, we've seen, it's quite unbelievable, Steve, and I was tracking it today, the amount of time the ANC top six is spending in Tshwane. They're not doing it because they like being in the capital city and it's convenient. It's clear that they believe either that they can win the municipality outright, which I think is unlikely at this point, or that, again, for the second election in a row, there's a real uphill battle for the ANC in Tshwane.
There are also, of course, new players. Now, I mean, we haven't spoken enough about the Freedom Front Plus, and let me just get that out of the way quickly, because they're an established party. they will have some places in Tshwane where they're always going to do relatively well.
Correct. So what is different about Tshwane compared to any other metro in the country is up until this election, even if you look at the 2019 elections, they're different sizes. There are 4 major parties, and the Freedom Front is the 4th major party. They did much better in 2019 than they did in 2016, where they got 2% of the vote. But even that 2% was far ahead of the 5th place party. Now you've got parties like Action SA, led by Abel Tau. He's their mayoral candidate. He's the former DA chair in Gauteng North, so in Tshwane. So is he going to be a factor? Patriotic Alliance in places like Eersterus. Are these new parties, these new entrants, able to affect this effective 4-party predictable pattern to Tshwane politics?
So you've got like a number of actors here. And again, as you say, unlikely that anyone gets a majority. For the EFF, they want to be the kingmaker. They want to be the ones who are able to say, you come to power through us. But then you're going to have other parties who, you might also need, plus the EFF, to form a coalition. So those negotiations afterwards could be incredibly intricate, or there could just be no negotiations at all, because everybody's so angry after the election campaign.
The Tshwane residents are in for a rough ride in the next few weeks. It's really hard to predict. We've already seen John Steenhuisen and the DA saying we will not work with EFF. You've already seen the Freedom Front say they'll not work with the ANC. So it is going to be, it's really hard to predict. And out of all the 8 metros, I really don't know how it's going to go on election night.
One of the questions would be, did the DA improve governance from where the ANC was in 2016, so over the 5 years? And part of that is also complicated by the fact that there was this court case, there was the fact that the Gauteng provincial government, which is, of course, run by the ANC, taking the then DA-led government of Tshwane, the council, into administration. That was overturned eventually. I would imagine many residents would be sort of quite skeptical about whether governance improved for them.
Correct. So you go from the situation in 2016. One of the reasons why the Democratic Alliance did well is because the state of Tshwane was in a perilous way. The DA takes over. Solim Simanga has a very bad relationship with the EFF. It becomes dysfunctional. He leaves office under you could say under a cloud.
Flurry of voice notes.
Then Stevens Mogalapa takes over. That didn't end very, very well. And the voters who came out in their droves to vote for the DA are wondering, where is this DA difference we hear that they make in Cape Town? It hasn't come here to Tshwane. And then Randall Williams comes in. He's been running a very difficult coalition for the last few years. Is he well known enough? Have people seen a difference during his time in office? The jury is out whether the DA and its coalition partners have made a big difference to the capital city.
Wayne Sussman, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed, the elections analyst. I really do appreciate the time.